I'm Ralph Preston. William Lowe and I are back to do yet another roadmap. And tonight we're going to talk a little bit about exercising at home for success. We're going to put it all together under that topic. I mean, this is something because we believe in that you get better at home and that you should have your own home program. We've probably covered a number of these things before, but we'll put them all together and talk about how you can package things up and do things so you might have more success at home. I know, William, you had some thoughts on this that you were going to start us off with. So why don't you go ahead and do that?
Yeah, sure. So I think this is a really important topic to cover. This idea of this idea of exercising at home for success. It's because essentially, when you think about it, in recovery after stroke, your brain is a product of its environment. So what this means is that when you first had your stroke and when you were receiving therapy from the hospital, and this might be through a rehab hospital, you might have noticed that your improvements were the most during this phase. And that's because obviously you had someone in the hospital who was keeping you accountable for, the exercises and the things that you had to do on a day-to-day basis so that you can make the most out of your recovery, especially in those early days where your brain's capacity and your brain's ability to improve is at its highest. But the thing with recovery after stroke is that once you run out of that insurance and once you get discharged from the hospital and once you're sent home, you're not going to have someone there to keep yourself accountable for the types of things which you have to do on a day-to-day basis to make sure that you get the most out of your recovery. In fact, the person who is going to be able to dictate the results that you get in your recovery after stroke is the person you see in the mirror or yourself. So essentially, the idea of exercising at home for success is this idea where when you're at home, it's important that you keep an eye out for the opportunities you have in order to work on or apply whatever you've already gotten back so that you can start to get the ball rolling in your recovery after stroke and see improvements a lot quicker than if you were stuck in the hospital and you were doing the exact same thing over and over again. So for example, these might be things that you might have done before your stroke on a day-to-day basis. And it might be as simple as including your affected hand or your affected leg in daily tasks which you would have typically done before you had your stroke. For example, this might mean doing things such as carrying the laundry basket from one room to another and making sure that you're using your affected hand to grip one of the handles at the same time while your non-affected hand is gripping the handle at the same time as well. It might also include, for example, a previous client of mine. They were able to use their thumb to press down and also extend at the same time. It might be something as simple as using your affected thumb to help you fold clothes because you've got that thumb back and you've got some movement in your hand that you can capitalize on so that you can actually start to see more improvements in your recovery. Needless to say, that client of mine, they can now open the hand, and that's as a result of jumping on what they got back in their recovery and applying that immediately to something which they could already do. And they were obviously able to see rewards from being able to do that. So, and I mean, other examples might also include, carrying the grocery basket with your affected hand from the car to inside the house. It could also mean opening doorknobs whenever you stand up from your bed and you're leaving your room. Making it a point to use your affected hand to lead by opening the doorknob so that you can leave your room. The same goes with stairs. Let's say if you have stairs at home leading to your house, it might mean leading with your affected leg and using your affected leg to go up the stairs, and vice versa when you're coming down the stairs as well, if you feel confident enough and if you feel that your affected leg is strong enough to support the weight of your body. So these are just all examples of things which you can do to maximize your chances of recovery when you're at home. And essentially, as you can see, it's being very cognizant of the things which are in your home environment and taking advantage of every opportunity you can to apply whatever your brain's already got back, so that you can see more improvements in your recovery, and also teach your brain to not forget what it's already gotten back, because as the common saying goes, if you don't use it, you lose it. So whenever you get a movement back in recovery after stroke, whether it be, obviously in that case I shared, being able to move your thumb a little bit, you have got to use that movement, because if you don't apply that movement to something which is relevant to you in your day-to-day life, such as, folding clothes or being able to, pick up a pen, something which you would have done before your stroke on a regular basis, then your brain's just going to forget it. And it's very likely that it's going to be extremely difficult to get back that movement further down the line, when it becomes a lot harder to see improvements when you're past that 6-month time frame after you've had your stroke. Because as we know, in that first year of recovery after stroke, that's when your improvements are at its peak, and it's a lot quicker to see changes as they come along. So if you can essentially have this attitude of exercising as much as possible as you see the opportunities around home, not only are you keeping yourself accountable in terms of your recovery and the things which you're doing, but you are also allowing yourself to get into a situation where, because you're applying something you've already gotten back in a different environment and under a different circumstance every time you do it, you're getting into a situation where you essentially can't reach that place where a lot of stroke survivors like to call it the plateau, where they stop seeing improvements because they've been doing the exact same thing over and over again. Because you're performing a movement in a different way and you're applying it in a different manner, and this could be, washing the dishes, using your affected hand to stabilize the plate. It could be, obviously folding laundry. Some of those examples which I shared previously, you are allowing your brain to gradually adapt itself to learn how to connect the dots a lot better and refine these movements as you've gotten them back, so that you can actually perform them better, because your brain has a natural tendency to want to improve what it's already got so that it can become a lot more efficient at performing a task. And this is something which Raf and I will obviously share with you guys a little bit further in this roadmap towards the end. But those are basically all of the examples that I want to share. And I hope for those folks who are watching this and listening to this roadmap right now, that makes sense, and why it's so important that that when you're at home, you're really exercising with success in mind. Because like I said, in the hospital, you have someone to keep you accountable for the types of things which you should be doing on a day-to-day basis. In other words, someone who's providing you with a routine. When you're at home, you don't have someone who's going to tell you what to do. And really the results are up to what you're willing to put in. And obviously when you're exercising on a day-to-day basis through daily tasks, which you would have done on a regular basis before your stroke, you no longer require an incentive to sit down and do exercise, but rather you're doing exercises because they're relevant to something which you typically would do on a day-to-day basis, which is a lot closer to what you would have done before you had your stroke. You never sat down to actually work your ability to move your thumb maybe 10 or 15 degrees outward, but rather you would do exercises as part of the daily task which you would have done on a day-to-day basis. For example, turning on taps, opening up doorknobs, carrying the laundry basket, or carrying things around the home. I hope that all makes sense for everyone listening to this roadmap right now. So I'm just going to pass it back to you, Ralph. I'm just curious, after hearing all that, and I know we had a discussion about this before we sat down to talk about this idea, I'm just wondering, did you have any thoughts to share based on your own experience and your recovery after stroke around this idea of exercising at home for success?
Sure. I'm going to take more of an overview because you gave a bunch of good examples. There's no point in my repeating examples. Washing the dishes isn't that much different than using your affected hand to, put something away in the refrigerator or whatever. So you were talking a little bit about a couple of things, accountability. Okay, let me drop back one more. I took a kind of a two-pronged approach. I exercised regularly, pretty much on the hour. I did something on the hour. And I did that most all day. But also, from the beginning, involved my affected hand in a number of things, like some of which you were talking about, doorknobs. I would sometimes repeat stuff. If I was opening a door, I'd open it with my affected hand, then I'd open it and not pull it towards me, let go, open it again just to get that rotating motion down. Same was true often when I put something down. If I didn't like the way I put it down, I'd let go and then I'd pick it up again and put it down again until I was happy with it. Figuring, if you're right there, you can open the fridge 5 times or put the thing up in there a couple of times while you're doing it. Gives you more repeats. So I took a kind of a two-pronged approach. I definitely set up an exercise routine and stuck to it. So now under accountability, you're the only one who's going to, be responsible for your accountability once you get home. And I did. I was accountable to myself. I wanted very much to get better, so I held myself to it. And when I didn't, I felt like I was letting things slip. And anyway, one of the things that is good to do, you also mentioned the word routine. So I set up a schedule and I stuck to it. Once you do that for a few days, you start to establish a routine. That helps a lot with attitude and a number of other things we won't get into right here. But when you know that when you get into a routine, you tend to do well with your program. You tend to look forward to it or know you're going to do it, and you don't have I didn't have as many motivation problems. So another thing, we talked about this in another roadmap, but so just give the 40,000-foot view, and that is one of the things that I didn't take a lot of naps. I rested 5 minutes at the end of every hour and went at it again. But some people have neurofatigue, and one of the things that you can do and should do is pay attention to your rhythms during the day and set up your program so that you're doing your blocks of exercise, your intentional exercise, at times when you have the least amount of neurofatigue and the most amount of brain power, because you'll learn that way. So let's see what else we got here. I also believe in making things easy. Okay, so I've got a couple of suction cup grab bars. They live on my counter. My exercise mat's over there on the floor. I got my TheraBands over my shoulder. Those dowels are still there from last week too. Point being, if I don't use a lot of equipment and stuff, just an exercise mat or something to grab onto or whatever. But the point is, if things are easy, you're much more likely to do them. If you have to get something out, move furniture around or whatever to do your exercising, you're less likely to do that. So make it easy. What else? I try to do it every day or most every day. I had sometimes appointments. I had sometimes bad days or bad half a days or whatever. But I try to stick to it, because once you make it a routine, then it becomes, for me, a lot easier to stick to it. Let's see, one other thing we talked about using that hand for everything. Another thing I did was I did a number of things, like long term. Okay, what do I mean by long term? I mean, okay, I want to be able to put on my slippers with my feet. I want to be able to do that toe squishy thing and scoot my foot up and drop my heel inside the slipper without having to like reach down and pull the heel and do it. That's the way you did it before, so I figured I'd do it that way. Now I wear slippers in the summer, so I had a 4, 5, 6 month season where I would do it in the winter, and I would just try it every day. And I swear it was 10 years before I could do it. But once I could do it, I tried it with socks on, and I tried it standing up, and I tried it standing up with socks on. That was the ultimate, and I got all of them. Of course, like anything else, if you don't use it, you lose it, like William said earlier. And so every fall, I kind of don't start over again, but I haven't been practicing, so it takes a little while to get back in the routine. A couple other things I did that with were, and I know, William, you and I talked about this. We both did this, something similar with pants. In the beginning, I wanted to put my pants on. I kind of tried it, really couldn't in the beginning, and my balance wasn't that great. So I came up with this idea of standing at the foot of the bed with my unaffected side towards the bed. And I actually could lean on the bed just a little bit, and that would give me the stability that I needed to learn the movement. Sometimes you have to learn the movement before you go trying to jump with both legs, put both legs through your pants. So I stood there with a little bit of support, which got rid of the fear, and I learned the motion. And as I learned the motion, I got a little better at it. And eventually, it took a while, but I moved away from the bed. Now I still like to have the bed there because if anything happens, I can always reach, but I don't have to reach. I can just lean. And I like to lean because I can keep putting my pants on. I'll do like just a little knee touch and then go back to it if I'm having trouble. So there are lots of things you can also do. Every day to get them down, to learn how to do them again. By this time of year, I've been putting those slippers on every morning for a few months, and I can do it again. I almost don't even think about it. So those are some things that I did. I'm sure, William, you got other things that you'd like to add. So go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So as everyone who's watching can see, the common theme here is that both Ralph and I, we actively applied something which our brain got back after our stroke in order to make our quality of lives better. And just to just to highlight, Ralph, your story of putting your pants on, I too also went through a period where when I first started off in the hospital with my stroke recovery, they had taught me how to put on my pants while sitting down. And I obviously wasn't a fan of this. I wanted to get a lot closer to something which I did before my stroke. So I wanted to teach myself how to put on my pants while I was standing up. And like Ralph, what I did was I first tried this while I went to a dressing room in a shopping mall. And what I would do is I knew that if I were to put on my pants while standing up, my affected leg had to essentially support the weight of my body for a long enough time in order for my non-affected leg to get through the other hole so that I could pull up my pants at the same time. So what I would do is I would use the wall of the dressing room to lean against so that I could give my brain a sense of reassurance that I wasn't going to fall should I start balancing on my affected leg before I lift up my non-affected leg to put it through the hole. And what I did in these early stages was I would give myself a countdown, 1, 2, 3, before I would lift up my non-affected leg and I would put it through the other hole of the pants. And over time, it started off messy, but over time, as I continued to persist, with teaching my brain to learn to trust the affected leg to support the weight of my body, I was able to eventually transition from that dressing room to now being able to put on my pants in the bathroom in a high pressure environment where if I do it wrong, I could either fall in the bathroom or I could end up ripping the pants by missing the hole when I'm balancing on my affected leg and trying to put my non-affected leg through the second hole. So basically, as you can see from that story, that it's really important to, when you go home and when you run out of insurance, to apply the movements which you've already gotten back in your recovery after stroke immediately to exercises or tasks which are relevant to you in your day-to-day life, or tasks which you would do on a regular basis. And this is important because in order for you to get to a place where you never plateau or your brain never stops improving, what you essentially have to do is you essentially have to keep performing what you've gotten back in different environments under different conditions, such that your brain can be constantly exposed to how it can constantly refine the movements which it's gotten back in order to become a lot more efficient at the task which you're doing. For example, Ralph, I know I knew you had a story where when you were learning to pick up a glass, sometimes when you place the glass down, it wouldn't be you wouldn't be able to place down the glass in a way which you liked, but through practice and through persistence, eventually you got to a stage where you were able to place it down like you did before you had your stroke. So that's just a testament to how your brain recovers. And as everyone has probably noticed by listening to this roadmap, that's essentially how neuroplasticity works. It's essentially your brain refining and learning how to do movements it's gotten back after you've had your stroke a lot better, so that you can essentially improve the quality of your life and be able to do things a lot easier than when you first started and when you first got back that movement. And obviously with more practice, that blueprint in your brain, it's going to expand and it's going to become a lot more elaborate until you've completely mastered the task or the exercise which you were trying to achieve when you first started your recovery after stroke. And this could be something as simple as, using silverware to eat food with both hands, making sure that you're using your affected hand to maybe hold the fork down, and using your non-affected hand to cut the meat instead of using your affected hand to hold the knife if you can't do that. So these are basically all examples of why it's so important to exercise at home for success. And as you can see, what essentially Ralph and I have shared in this roadmap is how we've taken advantage of every opportunity we've been given at home in order to get the ball rolling in our recovery after stroke, so that we can not only improve our own recovery, but also our quality of life in general, because we've taught our brain how to refine these movements over time, so that we can obviously improve our independence and get a lot closer to where we were before we had our stroke. So that's pretty much everything I had to share. I'll just pass back to you, Ralph. But did you have anything else to add from everything I've just shared just then?
Yeah, I got a couple more points. You were talking about hands here. I think you should be using your affected hand first. If you're only using one hand, then it should be your affected hand. But your unaffected hand should come in as the secondary. So don't let that hand not do anything. Involve it in everything. That's what I did. What else? There are a couple other overview type points. Because we've talked about flickers of movement and jumping on different things that happen to you when they happen, and the fact that recovery happens right away. I say, jump on anything that happens, get on it early, set up your own program way before you run out of insurance. You're gonna run out of insurance. So this transitions a lot. We said this, 5 or 10 times. This transitions a lot easier if you start it in a timely way where it becomes a part of your whole daily routine, as opposed to like, oh my God, I'm running out. I got to set up this program in the next week. I only have one more visit kind of mentality. What else? William covered this a little bit, but mix it up. Mix it up. That's what this, using your affected hand for dishwashing and carrying the laundry basket and all these things is you're challenging your brain from in ways that are not as predictable as I'm going to do arm curls or I'm going to do sit-to-stands or whatever. Also, some of these actions like washing dishes involve lots of different muscles. So mix it up. I said do it now because you will run out of insurance, and that's I guess that's pretty much it. Any routine is only as good as how much you do it and stick to it. So accountability is in your court. You want to get better, be accountable to yourself. So, anything else you have, William?
Yeah, I mean, just one more point before
Sure.
we wrap it up. So I just want to reiterate and really highlight Ralph's point of, mixing it up. So when you're mixing it up, what this does for your brain is it doesn't give your brain an excuse to get comfortable. And when you get comfortable, that's exactly when you get to that place where stroke survivors have called it the plateau, where you no longer see changes. That's because you're probably doing an exercise where you're just sitting there and you're just banging out repetitions and you're not necessarily forcing your brain to actually use any brain power. When you're doing these tasks around the home where you're doing dishes with both hands and you're incorporating both sides of your brain, this is a very complicated task. There are a lot of things which your brain has to process when you're doing these exercises, and that alone gives your brain the added incentive to justify to itself that it needs to work harder to rewire those lost connections and make these connections a lot stronger so that it can actually become a lot better in its recovery and become a lot more efficient at doing these movements, which it's already gotten back. So, as you can see, if you can keep this up in the long run, not only will this make your quality of life better, it's also going to allow you to move towards becoming more independent in your recovery after stroke. For example, it could be not having to have to sit down to put on your pants. You can do that standing up because you've taught yourself to do that at home. Not having to rely on your non-affected hand to carry groceries around when you're outside because you've trained yourself in a safe environment to do that with your affected hand. Having confidence that you're not going to lose your grip and actually drop the grocery bags in public. So all of this idea of exercising at home for success, it essentially allows you to do things in a safe environment. And when you're ready and when you're confident, transition everything you practice to real life so that you can do it in a pressured environment where obviously you're in public and you're confident enough to know that you're not going to drop, you're not going to mess up, and you're actually going to be able to do the task correct because you've trained your brain to do so.
All right. Well, I think part of the mixing it up thing and the not plateauing and everything has to do with, your brain likes predictability. And when you do these different kinds of tasks, it's more unpredictable and therefore more challenging. And your brain has to think about it and figure it out as opposed to being lazy and doing what something that is expected to do. So this mix it up concept is a good one. So why don't we wrap this up, William, and we'll see everybody next time. And thank you, William, for your time. And Thanks to all the viewers out there for tuning in on YouTube also.
No problem. Thanks, Ralph.